Hello and welcome. My name is Yevgeniy Rusakov and you're watching your favorite TVP World program, Interview from Vilnius. Recent drone-related incidents in the Baltic states have once again raised serious questions about regional security, public preparedness and the ability of governments to respond to new types of threats. As modern warfare evolves rapidly, concerns are also growing about how countries like Lithuania and its neighbors should adapt, both militarily and psychologically. To discuss these developments, we are joined by Viktorija Čmilytė-Nielsen, Lithuanian MP and former Speaker of the Board of Lithuanian Parliament. Viktorija, thank you for joining us today. Glad to see you in our studio.
Glad to be here.
What's your overall assessment on this recent situation with drones?
Well, I would say that in the Baltic countries, in Estonia, in Latvia, and last week in Lithuania as well, we had something that could be called a test with accidental or not accidental, this remains to be investigated, drone incursions. And while it has been an unpleasant test, I would still like to see it also as a positive because it gave the society a chance, society at large, to test our preparedness for the new dangers of the time of hybrid warfare and generally of what it is like to be living here on the edge of the NATO eastern flank. Having said that, of course, it's an unpleasant experience, but it also is a shake-up for the government, for our different agencies, to not just follow and support Ukraine, but do a little bit more in very real, down-to-earth terms, so to speak.
Sure.
And that apparently was necessary. So I would say that this is the experience, well, and maybe a summary of what has happened, what we have experienced over the past week.
Okay, what do you think was the main objectives of those drone-related incidents?
Well, I would say that possible, because we don't know whether it was just accidental or whether it is purposeful, with GPS signals jamming being redirected towards the Baltic countries. But I think the malign intention could be to, of course, to cause panic, to disrupt, to also to discourage certain countries, and especially the Baltic countries are the ones who are most supportive of Ukraine, to discourage them from supporting Ukraine. And we have seen also a lot of ramping up of rhetorics on the Russian side, even including in the United Nations.
Yes.
The threats, very, very specific, aggressive, as usual, threats against our neighbors in Latvia, completely ungrounded, completely unfounded, but nevertheless, this also has to be noted. So I would say that, well, the objectives could be interpreted as these, but from our side, well, we have to be more resilient and we have to, well, invest both time, effort, and very, come up with very clear algorithms where we were lacking some.
Okay, briefly, do you think these incidents were also meant to test public psychologically rather than just airspace security?
Well, I would say that generally, if we look at the situation over the slightly longer period of time, we have seen a lot of different tests, small tests sometimes, from the unfriendly actors, from our adversaries, aimed at attacking the cohesion of our society. Well, in other words, to say, to see if society is together, is strong and firm in terms of its will to resist whatever danger comes our way. So that, of course, is one of the aims of our adversaries, always to attack, to disrupt, even to fuel, yes, and to fuel sort of the most radical views, completely unrelated to which political strands they represent. It doesn't matter. As long as it's radical, as long as it's disruptive, and as long as it goes against the, the main consensus on the national security or national defense, it works.
Okay, let's talk about criticism. So there's been some considerable criticism regarding Lithuania's response to this incident. And in your view, where did the authorities act appropriately, and where were the main shortcomings?
Well, I would probably start by saying that the criticism was internal, right? Not of Lithuania from external, not from our allies, not from partners, but internally. One of the things that have been clear is that, for instance, education system is not equally ready, meaning equally prepared for these kinds of threats. So some schools have been exemplary in terms of going to a shelter when we had the air alert. Others were less so, and that is, of course, a lesson to learn. So that was one thing, and that probably got most attention, and deservedly so. Some institutions discovered that they don't have enough space, or they don't have shelters.
Some people found out that the shelters were just closed.
Exactly. So they should be unlocked. That's a good lesson. So while we are being a little bit joking about it, it's of course also very serious. But again, it was a test. Not everyone failed it, but not everyone excelled in it. So we have to draw lessons, and also what is important, to draw them quickly, because there's every reason to assume that such small incursions or stowaway drones could pass by our way. And of course, well, another thing is the ability to intercept them, to shoot them down. That is also something that we have to work on. Okay, let's talk about your personal experience. So when you were Lithuania, when you represented Lithuania as a speaker of the board of Lithuanian Parliament, you visited Ukraine and you faced air raid alarm there. So how would you compare Ukrainians' reaction to what we had here in Lithuania? Well, I think it's clear, of course, that Ukrainians, having experienced all the imaginable atrocities of war since, some regions from 2014, the whole of Ukraine from 2022, obviously, they have, I would say, more levels of alertness. Their experience, it comes from a horrible situation of war, and that is the distinction that is important to note. Quite some processes go much slower when you're in time of peace, also including in terms of preparedness, in terms of acquiring certain things. We often get drawn into bureaucracy, which is fine enough for peacetime and necessary as part of our apparatus. But not during the wartime. But it doesn't work. And I actually, I quite liked the phrase that President of Latvia, Yevgeniy said just the other day, that, well, we are not at war, but it's not peace. So it's something in the middle. And we don't really have the protocol for something in the middle. And that we have to learn, because that is what life dictates to us. So once again, when we look at it, it's a task for Lithuanian institutions, it's a task to the society at large, but also, I think, the third very important element, it's a task for NATO. So in this dangerous situation, there's also, of course, an opportunity to learn to deal with this particular danger. And actually, in the upcoming week, we have a NATO Parliamentary Assembly gathering in Vilnius. This will be an excellent opportunity, not just to speak about, political, slightly sometimes hollow things, but also about what is happening here, but also what we can do to counter this new type of danger, new type for us, for mainland NATO countries, and of course to learn to deal with that. Okay. Former CIA agent James Acuna has argued that Baltic countries are still focusing too heavily on traditional military capabilities, despite the central role drones now play in modern warfare. So, do you think this criticism is fair? It's a good point. I would put it like this diplomatically. The bigger the machinery, the slower it changes its, you know, exactly. But when it changes, it does it again very solidly. We know that. But of course, considering our own situation, geopolitics, and everything that is coming our way, it's just very reasonable, logical, and rational to put more funds of the very considerable sum that we are distributing towards our defense into air defense, and specifically into drone warfare. That's just common sense, and I think our military understands it, our politicians, those who work in the area, like myself in the National Security Committee, we understand it. And well, it's just a question of you know, making it work on the between the institution level. But once again, I mean, we are trying to get them.
Okay, so now you tell me, when would those understandings of the situation will become a practical steps?
Well, as I'm in opposition, I would have liked to say that yesterday it should have, but of course we are here really, despite politics, in the same camp, you know, in Lithuania, and also with our allies, obviously, abroad. So politics doesn't play a big role here. And well, our Minister of Defense has mentioned July, well, in a couple of months, being the date when we will be somewhat more effectively ready for such type of threats. But of course, you know, it's the process that will never end. I mean, the drone and anti-drone systems get very quickly, they change very quickly, and they get real-life frontline testing in Ukraine, in, well, Russia attacks, Ukrainian defend. So we have to learn from that, and of course, be quick and efficient. And that is probably our main task, as what I have mentioned before. In the time of peace, processes tend to move a bit slower, and we have to overcome that.
More broadly, what lessons should Lithuania and the rest of the Baltic states draw from these incidents, both militarily and psychologically?
I would say psychologically, because, well, psychology and, well, as I said, cohesion of the society is very important here. There is no need to panic. Everyone should know their role. You don't need to have free lists of tasks you have to do, but you have to know where you go in case of air alert, and well, what necessary things you have to, what necessary steps you have to take. So institutions have to make sure that these places are available in case of air raids and air alerts. Sorry, and well, in terms of more broadly, I would say the whole of NATO should look at the drone warfare not as something that is happening just in the war, in Russia's aggression against Ukraine, but also that could potentially be an issue for countries that are not at all in the situation of Ukraine. So, well, the third point, once again, our defense sector, our defense ministry, military, of course, are on the way of acquiring necessary equipment, but they should speed up, because we have got a lot of time, thanks to the bravery, to the courage of Ukrainians. We are aware of that. But this time is somewhat expiring, and we have to be quicker.
Viktorija, one last question. Do you know where the nearest shelter is?
Yes, I do, because, well, we had an unfortunate necessity to test it during our National Security Committee meeting during the last week. So, and it works.
Brilliant. It's good that it works. Viktorija, thank you so much for joining us today, and I really hope to see you once again in our studio with some, hopefully, more positive topics, but it is as it is.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was Viktorija Čmilytė-Nielsen, Lithuanian MP and former Speaker of the Board of Lithuanian Parliament. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.